China and the United States are locked in a high-stakes competition.
As the sun rises over the contested waters of the South China Sea, the world's attention is drawn to yet another simmering theater of strategic confrontation. In Manila, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. reviews the encroaching red lines on a map of the disputed waters, each one a stark reminder of Beijing's relentless maritime expansion.
Our neighbors and all the interested parties, which include the EU, certainly the United States, have all come to talk to us and say that there is much that we can still do. And let's explore this or let's explore that.
Meanwhile, in Hanoi, seasoned Vietnamese leaders, veterans of wars against global superpowers, prepare for another battle to defend their sovereignty. This is no ordinary territorial squabble. It is a contest for regional dominance, a clash of wills between emerging resistance and an ascendant China seeking to reshape the Indo-Pacific order. The Philippines and Vietnam, long accustomed to navigating the complexities of geopolitics, now find themselves at the forefront of this maritime struggle. Their response is not mere reaction. It is a calculated assertion of agency in a region grappling with the implications of China's ambitions. Naval patrols become acts of defiance. Diplomatic overtures transform into strategic alliances, and the South China Sea emerges as a microcosm of the broader contest for influence between China and the US-led coalition.
Good to see you.
Beijing's South China Sea strategy is a masterclass in geopolitical brinkmanship. Its approach combines salami-slicing tactics with overt displays of power, turning isolated rocks and reefs into fortified outposts equipped with airstrips, missile systems, and subterranean bunkers. Mischief Reef, now a sprawling military installation, stands as a testament to China's ability to transform maritime claims into strategic footholds, altering the balance of power in the region. These maneuvers are not confined to infrastructure. Imagine a Filipino sailor gripping the wheel of his ship, only to face a Chinese Coast Guard member brandishing an axe. The chilling encounter, which cost the sailor his thumb, underscores the lengths China is willing to go in its bid to dominate the South China Sea. The ramming of fishing vessels, the use of water cannons against Filipino resupply missions, and chilling encounters like the infamous axe-wielding Chinese Coast Guard officer are all tools in a broader campaign of coercion. Such actions are designed not only to assert dominance, but to instill a psychological advantage over smaller states, eroding their confidence in maintaining control over their exclusive economic zones. Despite their differing historical trajectories, the Philippines and Vietnam find common cause in resisting China's assertiveness. Vietnam, with its storied history of repelling invaders, from French colonial forces to American military interventions, draws on a legacy of resilience. Its strategy involves fortifying outposts and leveraging its maritime capabilities while pursuing multilateral engagements to counterbalance Beijing's influence. The Philippines, meanwhile, has adopted a dual-track approach. On one hand, it publicly calls out China's actions, leveraging forums like the United Nations to highlight Beijing's disregard for international law. On the other, it strengthens its security ties with the United States through agreements like the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, which grants Washington access to key military bases near contested areas. Together, Manila and Hanoi represent a growing coalition of states willing to challenge China's unilateral assertions, signaling to Beijing that its actions will not go unchecked. The South China Sea has become the epicenter of the fierce rivalry between China and the United States, with the region's nations caught in the crossfire. For the Philippines, a longtime U.S. ally, the choice is clear, aligning more closely with Washington as China's actions in disputed waters grow increasingly aggressive. In 2023, the Philippines granted the U.S. access to 4 new military bases under EDCA, which are strategically located to counter China's influence. These bases are crucial for joint patrols and military drills, signaling Manila's shift toward bolstering its defense with American backing. Vietnam, on the other hand, treads a more cautious path. While Hanoi has deep historical grievances with Beijing, including China's forcible seizure of the Paracel Islands in 1974, it avoids full alignment with the US to maintain its strategic autonomy. However, Vietnam isn't passive. In 2022, it reportedly spent $1.1 billion on Russian-made submarines and coastal defense systems to deter Chinese incursions. Meanwhile, the US continues its freedom of navigation operations, FONOPs, in the South China Sea, challenging Beijing's expansive claims by sailing warships through contested waters. These maneuvers underline America's commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific, even as China builds artificial islands and installs military-grade weapons on them, reinforcing its grip on one of the world's most critical maritime routes. This rivalry underscores the high stakes for smaller nations like the Philippines and Vietnam navigating a dangerous game of power and pragmatism. In 2024, the Philippines deepened its military collaboration with the US, granting access to multiple bases under EDCA. This partnership was exemplified by the deployment of the US Army's Mid-Range Capability System during Exercise Salak-Nib 24, marking its first deployment in the Philippines. China's ambitions in the South China Sea stretch far beyond its shores, with its military presence now observed as far as 1,600 kilometers from the mainland. In 2024, this reach isn't just theoretical. It's embodied by fortified artificial islands like Mischief Reef, transformed into military garrisons, complete with missile launchers, radar stations, and airstrips for fighter jets. For the Philippines and Vietnam, these encroachments are more than just lines on a map. They're existential threats. Imagine a Philippine fishing vessel near Ayungin Shoal, shadowed by massive Chinese militia ships. In recent months, Filipino fishermen have reported being driven off by high-powered water cannons, losing their livelihoods in the process. In Vietnam's Vanguard Bank, the stakes are equally high. Energy companies contracted by Hanoi to explore oil reserves in the area have faced intimidation from Chinese Coast Guard ships, sometimes involving deliberate ramming. These aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a broader pattern of coercion, with Beijing employing its cabbage strategy, surrounding contested areas with layers of naval militia and Coast Guard vessels. For local communities, the tension translates into fear and uncertainty, as livelihoods tied to fishing and energy exploration hang in the balance. The story of the South China Sea isn't just one of global power politics, but also of smaller nations struggling to hold their ground against an unrelenting giant. Imagine a bustling highway, not for cars, but for massive cargo ships carrying goods worth trillions of dollars. This is the South China Sea, a vital maritime trade route through which 1/3 of global shipping passes annually, totaling over $3.5 trillion in trade. Beneath its sparkling blue waters lie untapped riches, an estimated 11 billion barrels of oil, and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Add to this the rich fishing grounds providing livelihood and sustenance to millions in the region. Take the Spratly Islands, for instance, a collection of rocky outcrops and reefs scattered across these contested waters. While their landmass might seem insignificant, what lies around them is a treasure trove. Control of these islands doesn't just mean sovereignty over the rocks, but domination over the resources and the vast economic zone surrounding them. This is why China, Vietnam, the Philippines, and others are locked in a high-stakes battle. China's construction of artificial islands like Mischief Reef has transformed them into military fortresses, capable of projecting power far beyond their shores. This aggressive move isn't just about strategic positioning. It's about rewriting the rules in a region where livelihoods and global commerce are on the line. Once a pristine coral reef in the heart of the South China Sea, Mischief Reef now stands as a glaring symbol of China's sweeping ambitions. Originally claimed by the Philippines as part of its exclusive economic zone, this once natural formation has been transformed into a sprawling artificial island bristling with military infrastructure. Satellite images reveal the extent of its metamorphosis. Airstrips long enough to land fighter jets, radar installations capable of monitoring the entire region, and fortified hangars that could house a fleet of warplanes. China's activities on Mischief Reef have not gone unnoticed. Despite a 2016 ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration in favor of the Philippines declaring China's claims invalid, Beijing's militarization of the reef continues unabated. This act has sparked international condemnation, with Manila vocally protesting the incursion. Yet China's grip tightens, raising tensions and drawing a sharp divide between those who support its expansionist policies and those who resist its growing dominance. For the Philippines, Mischief Reef is more than a territorial dispute. It's a stark reminder of the ongoing battle to protect its sovereignty in the face of relentless aggression. The South China Sea has become a chessboard for great power competition, with the United States positioning itself as a key player to counter China's aggressive maneuvers. In response to Beijing's militarization of artificial islands and encroachment into contested waters, the U.S. has intensified these missions involving warships like the USS Benfold and aircraft carriers such as the USS Ronald Reagan, underscore Washington's commitment to ensuring the South China Sea remains open to international trade and navigation. The stakes are high. The U.S. has conducted joint naval exercises with allies, including the Philippines, Japan, and Australia, signaling its readiness to confront any challenge to the status quo. In 2024 alone, the U.S. Navy reported over 60 patrols in disputed waters, each met with Chinese protests and shadowing by its naval forces. By projecting power in the region, the United States not only counters China's dominance, but also reassures Southeast Asian nations that they are not alone in this high-stakes geopolitical struggle. However, with every naval encounter, the risk of miscalculation grows, threatening to ignite a flashpoint in these already volatile waters. The Philippines has adopted a bold and strategic approach to counter China's encroachment in the South China Sea. At the heart of this strategy is transparency, publicly calling out China's aggressive actions in the region. This approach gained momentum in 2016 when the Philippines took China to the International Court of Arbitration, challenging China's expansive claims under the controversial 9-dash line. In a landmark ruling, the court declared China's claims to much of the South China Sea as invalid, a victory hailed by Filipinos as a triumph of international law. Despite China's outright rejection of the ruling, the Philippines continues to use it as a cornerstone of its defense strategy, bringing global attention to Beijing's unlawful actions. To legal victories, the Philippines has strategically strengthened its position by fostering closer ties with the United States. This partnership has grown deeper, with the U.S. gaining access to Philippine military bases, enhancing its ability to project power in the region. This move has not been without controversy, as many regional neighbors caution against pushing too close to the U.S. military. However, the Philippines remains resolute, using both diplomacy and military support to resist China's growing presence. With transparency, legal victories, and strengthened alliances, the Philippines continues to defend its territorial rights, making it a key player in the ongoing South China Sea dispute. In a significant shift in its defense strategy, the Philippines has deepened its military ties with the United States, a move seen as crucial in countering China's growing influence in the South China Sea. Under the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty, the two nations are bound to support each other in case of an armed attack. To strengthen this alliance, the Philippines has granted the U.S. access to military bases across the country, particularly those located near critical maritime choke points. These bases are strategically located in the so-called First Island Chain, which stretches from Japan to Taiwan and down to the Philippines, placing U.S. forces in a prime position to monitor and respond to Chinese activities in the region. This collaboration is not without controversy, as it places the Philippines at the heart of the U.S.-China rivalry. Some regional actors warn against becoming too closely aligned with the U.S., fearing that it could escalate tensions with China. Despite these concerns, the Philippines sees the alliance as vital to its national security, especially as China continues to assert control over disputed territories in the South China Sea. With the support of the U.S., the Philippines aims to bolster its defense capabilities, ensuring that it is not left vulnerable in the face of China's expanding military presence. The strengthening of the US-Philippine alliance is a clear message to Beijing that the Philippines is not alone in this fight for territorial sovereignty. Vietnam has adopted a delicate balancing act in the South China Sea, strategically ramping up its military outposts on the Spratlys and other contested islands. Despite increasing its presence, Hanoi treads carefully, avoiding direct confrontation with China. This cautious approach stems from Vietnam's historical ties with China, its geographical proximity, and the heavy trade dependency between the two nations. In 2023, China was Vietnam's largest trading partner, with bilateral trade exceeding $200 billion, making any significant disruption in relations potentially disastrous for Vietnam's economy. While mindful of economic and diplomatic ramifications, Vietnam has continued to assert its sovereignty over its claimed territories in the South China Sea, particularly around the Paracel and Spratly Islands. In recent years, Vietnam has fortified its military capabilities and expanded its naval assets to defend its interests. For example, Vietnam's recent investments in advanced radar systems and the construction of fortified bases on its islands signal a shift toward more robust defense capabilities. Despite this, Vietnam continues to call for peaceful resolutions to the disputes, preferring multilateral discussions under frameworks like the Association of Southeast Asian Nations rather than risking direct conflict with China. This nuanced approach ensures that Vietnam protects its sovereignty while avoiding a full-scale escalation with a regional giant like China. Vietnam has masterfully employed what is known as bamboo diplomacy, a strategic approach of bending but not breaking under external pressure from both China and the United States. This delicate balancing act allows Vietnam to maintain sovereignty over its South China Sea claims without fully aligning with any one power. While Vietnam has ramped up military and diplomatic efforts to protect its territorial rights in the region, it also nurtures its economic and trade relationship with China, its largest trading partner. In 2023, trade between the two countries reached nearly $200 billion, emphasizing Vietnam's reliance on China for its economic prosperity. At the same time, Vietnam fosters a strong partnership with the United States, particularly in defense and strategic matters. Vietnam has welcomed U.S. support for freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, and in return, it has grown increasingly comfortable with U.S. military presence in the region. However, Vietnam avoids openly antagonizing China by limiting its involvement in overtly anti-China actions or alliances. This bamboo diplomacy approach is aimed at ensuring regional stability, allowing Vietnam to benefit from both Chinese economic ties and U.S. security support, all while preventing itself from becoming a pawn in the broader U.S.-China rivalry. Through this strategy, Vietnam has managed to navigate a path between two global powers, carefully preserving its national interests in one of the most geopolitically sensitive regions of the world. The Philippines and Vietnam have adopted distinct strategies to confront China's growing influence in the South China Sea. The Philippines strengthens its position through a close alliance with the U.S., leveraging international legal rulings and military cooperation to challenge China's territorial claims. Meanwhile, Vietnam practices bamboo diplomacy, carefully balancing its relationships with China and the U.S., fortifying its military presence while avoiding direct confrontation. Both nations are committed to defending their sovereignty, employing a mix of military, diplomatic, and strategic alliances to counter China's aggression.